Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to share my Bitcoin strategy as part of my portfolio allocation plan and explain why I'm implementing this now. I'm still a small growing YouTube channel, so if you like the content, don't forget to smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new, so you're alerted every time I publish new videos surrounding finance news, stocks, and investing. With that out of the way, guys, let's get into the video. Real quick, I have been getting a lot of comments about my audio being way too low. I'm still troubleshooting it, guys. I don't know if it is low. It doesn't sound low to me, but if it does sound low to you, please let me know down below in the comments section. All right, I am fiddling around with the settings. I think it's the software. I uninstalled the software for the mic, so we'll see if that does really well for this video. Okay, let's get into it, guys. So this is my portfolio. I did a recent video basically explaining that I'm including two new pieces to my overall portfolio, and that is going to be a allocation to treasuries and an allocation to Bitcoin, okay, or a Bitcoin strategy. Now, for today's video, we're going to be speaking strictly on the Bitcoin strategy. Now, there is some blurred lines, okay, because I am using a high yield cover call ETF for this strategy. So it might count as high yield income, but I'm going to just put it in the bucket of the Bitcoin strategy. All right, again, this is a very high risk portfolio. Don't copy my trades, do your own research. This is for information and entertainment purposes only. All those disclaimers, you guys already know that. Okay. So I got to start from the beginning, and hopefully this video is not going to be too long in the tooth. I really do hope you guys will enjoy it. So I have been very bearish on strategy or MicroStrategy. I think, it was basically a Ponzi scheme, that there was not really a whole lot of reason to invest in the company. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? I couldn't find a reason to invest in it, right? And I decided that I wanted to dive in and actually understand strategy, right? Understand the company, understand the man, myth, and legend, Michael Saylor, understand his thinking and mindset. So inadvertently, I actually became more bullish on Bitcoin and strategy over time through my research and through all the videos I watched, all the articles I've read, and understanding the platform as it's known of strategy and what it's actually going to be used for, or what the vision is for strategy. So I inadvertently became bullish on this, but I got to give a shout out to Pay Me in Dividends. If you haven't checked out his channel, I really recommend you do. He actually came here to my local area out here in Thailand, and we got together, had some cigars, and we're just basically talking finance. All right. So this is really where it all started from. So I got to give him a huge shout out, because I was explaining to him, like, I just don't find, I don't see a reason to invest in strategy or anything related to strategy, even MSTY, right? Or any of the MSTR linked ETF, cover call ETFs. And he kind of said it in a way that just got me thinking. He said, if you're bullish on Bitcoin, then you're bullish on MSTR. And he kind of just went into the reasons why. And, we had a very, very lengthy talk, because that's what YouTubers do who are in the finance space. We just get together and talk finance, right? Can't talk about anything else. So we talked for probably what seemed like a couple of hours about investing, strategy, Bitcoin, the future, economy, and where everything is kind of going. And this led me to British Hodl. Okay, so shout out to British Hodl. He's a much larger channel than myself, but I find his content is absolutely good. Really, really good at explaining Bitcoin, what strategy is, and what it's becoming, right? What the way ahead is becoming. And he has this strategy called, he calls it the Holy Trinity, if I'm not mistaken. So he calls it the Holy Trinity of investing into a Bitcoin strategy. And I'm going to go over all of that here in a moment. This led me down a rabbit hole to New Foundations. So again, they have a really good channel as well. They talk about everything related to Bitcoin treasury companies. And I had a lot of good, I got a lot of good information from these guys as well. They do really good interviews. So recommend people check them out if you want some other information. And of course, this recently came out, from Jordan Peterson. He did an interview with Michael Saylor, and I listened to this interview and was absolutely blown away. Like, I never really watched Michael Saylor content. I didn't even watch the one he did with Patrick Bet-David, but I watched this interview and I was completely blown away. Like, now I'm a huge fan of Michael Saylor. And again, I was trying to find a reason not to invest in strategy, and I inadvertently became bullish. So Michael Saylor, smart guy, and understanding his story and the reason why he is where he is today is really, really interesting, because he did not start off as a Bitcoin bull. As a matter of fact, he didn't even like Bitcoin. It wasn't until he reached a certain point where he was thinking, you know, like, maybe I should look at Bitcoin. And it was because he had a company that was basically, you know, for lack of a better term, not growing, you know, it was basically stale. And he didn't want to just, you know, kind of ride off into the sunset. He wanted to keep competing and keep trying to find a way to basically build something, a legacy. So this is where the Bitcoin treasury idea came from. And I think now it is a fantastic idea. So anyways, again, check out these guys, British HODL, Pay Me in Dividends, and New Foundations. All right. So we're going to be talking about strategy. Now I have, you know, again, this is just through all the research I've done and everything as I understand it. So if I am wrong, please let me know down below in the comment section. All right. Or help me understand this stuff better. But the way I understand it is you have MSTR stock. Okay. This is your common share. This is what anyone can buy. This is the most volatile common stock that they have, or the most volatile stock that they have. They use all the proceeds from MSTR to buy Bitcoin. So when you're investing in strategy, you're investing in a leveraged Bitcoin, okay, in a leveraged Bitcoin strategy, essentially. So these common shares are used to buy more Bitcoin. So if you're, you know, kind of bullish on Bitcoin, this is a good play. Now, he came out with a couple different other preferred shares. Okay, he calls them perpetual preferred shares. He came out with Stride, Strike, and Strife. All right, and these all serve a different purpose. And this is what we're going to get into and why I'm so bullish on Bitcoin now. All right. So Stride is more or less, this is the latest one he came out with. It's more or less a junk bond. Think of it that way. It's more or less a junk bond. It could pay you up to 10%. This is probably a little more on the higher risk scale of things. All right. Then you have Strike. Now this is for, you know, near retirees or long-term growth investors that want upside plus income. All right. Because you're going to get a nice dividend yield, but also if the shares of MSTR, you know, reach, I think $1,000, then Strike shares will be converted to MSTR shares. All right. I don't know how the mechanics of that works, but that's essentially what makes Strike so attractive, is that these can be converted to MSTR shares, which would be really, really cool because, you know, you've been collecting an 8% dividend this whole time, and now the shares of MSTR are at a higher price, so these can get converted, which is really, really cool. Now, Strife is really an interesting one. Okay, Strife is for pension funds, insurance companies, you know, or the ultra conservative investors. These don't convert, but they're going to be paying you out about a 10% dividend yield, and if they can't pay you that out, I think they give you like an 18% dividend yield if they miss anything or something to that nature. So Stride, Strike, and Strife. The reason why these are so important is because of MSTR, the common shares. Common shares are very volatile. So all these other investors, they want something else. They want something a little more stable, something not as volatile, so they can go to Stride, Strike, or Strife, right? And Michael Saylor / Strategy is using all the proceeds from all of these, you know, MSTR, Stride, Strike, and Strife, to purchase more Bitcoin. They use that money to purchase more Bitcoin. Their whole goal is to acquire more Bitcoin. Okay, so you as a MSTR shareholder, that is why you invest in MSTR. So they can come out with these products that will give them more liquidity, more money, more investment to buy Bitcoin. So this is all well and good. This is all cool, right? What does that actually mean for anybody? Well, looking at MSTR as a platform, okay? And I know this is going to get kind of big brained here, but just stay with me. If you look at MSTR as a platform, it is an indirect way to invest in Bitcoin, which we already know, right? And they're coming out with different ways that different types of investors can invest indirectly into Bitcoin or have some type of backing of Bitcoin, right? Like what is better, you know, a bond that has, you know, $60 billion worth of assets in the back, you know, / Bitcoin, or a company that has, you know, maybe $10 billion worth of cash that they're burning through, right? Or that the company needs to raise this money in order to do whatever, you know, work on their company, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So Bitcoin can appreciate in value. That's the key. Bitcoin can absolutely appreciate in value faster than a company that's holding cash and trying to grow their cash. Okay, usually companies come out with bonds or preferred shares so they can raise cash in order to continue the business, expand the business, that kind of stuff. So all Strategy is doing is just acquiring more Bitcoin, and they hold currently 500, almost 600,000 Bitcoin. That is ridiculous. They hold almost 600,000 Bitcoin. So the cool thing about this is, again, a bet on MSTR is a bet on Bitcoin, right? If you're bullish on Bitcoin, you're bullish on MSTR. Now their price, the prices between MSTR and Bitcoin, they used to be very close together. Now they kind of hovered apart from each other. And that's because, Michael Saylor / Strategy was, kind of diluting the MSTR share by issuing out more shares. So now there's this, and I call it a decoupling. You can call it whatever you want, but now there's sort of this decoupling. But again, if MSTR is tied to the price of Bitcoin and Bitcoin rises and goes on this crazy bull run, what do you think is going to happen for MSTR? MSTR is also going to appreciate in value. Okay, so again, I know this is very big brain. I'm yelling a bunch of things and talking really fast, but stick with me here. So if MSTR appreciates in value and it's considered a leverage play on Bitcoin, actually it's probably a cheaper price than Bitcoin when you think about it. This is a good thing. This is a really, really good thing. Not only that, MSTR is going to be volatile because of its tie to Bitcoin. So MSTR will always be volatile to Bitcoin. All right. Now, there's some narratives out there that as more institutions adopt Bitcoin as part of their treasuries, as part of their Bitcoin treasuries, more institutions start adopting it, more companies. You have GameStop, you have MetaPlanet, is it MetaPlanet? I think it's MetaPlanet or something like that. You have all these other companies that are adopting Bitcoin as part of their strategy, as part of their treasuries. Now, I think that this will probably lower the wild swings that we've had for Bitcoin, because more and more companies and people are starting to actually hold Bitcoin versus trading it and selling it, and causing those huge dips. So the idea is that more Bitcoin that's acquired by these companies and held, like BlackRock, which owns IBIT, it can create some type of stability for Bitcoin, right? It's not going to have those really, really wild price swings like it used to. All right, that's just one narrative. I'm not saying that is fact. But MSTR, because it's tied to Bitcoin and Bitcoin is volatile, MSTR will always be volatile, supposedly. Now, I opened a position with MSTY, okay? This is in my portfolio right now. I put in $50,000 into MSTY. All right, so I have 2,300 shares. Now I'm going to talk about the reasons, right? I'm going to show you kind of the strategy behind all of this, right? Why is this all important? Why did I start off with MSTY? So I don't have a lot of Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, I have no Bitcoin. I have a Bitcoin linked ETF. I have IBIT, but that is a very small position, right? I didn't really have a strategy. I didn't really feel the need to have a strategy other than buy DCA and then kind of just leave it alone, right? But I think there's some bigger things happening in the world, as we know it, in the broader US markets, in the broader US economy, that is going to be an absolute tailwind for strategy and for Bitcoin. Now, let me explain. This is the Holy Trinity setup, okay? This is what I got from British Hodl, and this is the strategy that Pay Me in Dividends was explaining. Again, really a big shout out to both those channels. I mean, they helped me kind of like understand this at a high level, and this is why I inadvertently became bullish. Okay, so here we go. Since I don't have a lot of like Bitcoin to start off with, I don't exactly have like $4 million worth of Bitcoin that I'm just hanging on to. So I have to build up this position. Right. But this is an appreciation play. Okay. This doesn't exactly pay a dividend, and it's going to take some time for that, share price to actually go up in value. I could invest in strategy, which is a growth play, right? It's just a growth play off of Bitcoin. But what if I was to use something to harvest or farm the volatility off of strategy, right? So this is where it comes in. I decided to go with Yieldmax. I went with Yieldmax's ETF MSTY, which is a MSTR option income ETF. The distributions on MSTY are kind of crazy. Let's just look at it real fast. You know, I've seen this go as high as like 120%, right? The distribution yields on this is crazy. You guys can check this out. If you're a high yield dividend investor, then you already know this. I mean, this is one of the most popular funds out there, but you guys can see the distribution yields, right? And it pays off based on the volatility of MSTR. Okay. So we have to keep that in mind. If MSTR is always going to be volatile or planned to be, you know, as volatile because of Bitcoin, then you can kind of surmise that MSTY will always have a decent payout. Not always, not every time, maybe not forever, but you can at least, your best guess is that because of the volatility with MSTR, that MSTY should have really good, decent income, at least for the next couple of years. And I'm going to explain why I'm thinking in years and not just a day, a week, a month. Okay. So back to this, back to strategy. Actually back to the screenshot. So this is the Holy Trinity setup. Okay. And I'm starting off with Yieldmax for income. And what I'm going to do is every time I get paid, I'm going to move some money into strategy, the actual shares for growth, and IBIT as a savings account. Now, this could get changed at any moment, but this is the plan as it is for now. Okay. I'm also going to use some of the distribution income to reinvest back into MSTY to acquire more shares. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are about to hit me with the NAV erosion piece and all that stuff. I completely agree. I understand all of that. All right. I'm a very big, well, I will say I'm in the camp that NAV erosion does exist. All right. It's the new flat earth theory. You either believe it or you don't, but I do believe that NAV erosion exists, especially for high income yielding products like Yieldmax. Okay. Because NAV erosion essentially is due to high payouts, high distribution payouts. The reason why MSTY hasn't had it is because of the volatility of strategy and how strategy rose in price over the last couple of years because of Bitcoin. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, let me minimize this. All right, we went over this. I had some different options. I could have went with MSII from Rex Shares. I could have went with MST from Defiance. I could have went with IMST from Bitwise. But I decided again, MSTY is the OG, been around a long time, a lot longer than these other ones. They've done really well over the last 30 days. We can kind of see from here that, you know, here's the returns for these guys. So you have MST negative 1.88%, MSTY negative 3.52%, IMST negative 1%. MSII is actually in the green by 69 basis points. But if we look at total return, we can see a little bit of a different story. Okay, MST returned 2.39%, MSTY 3.33%, IMST 2.66%, MSII 2.54%. All right, so MSTY is obviously killing it because of their high distributions, but these are all different strategies as well. MSTY is a pure cover call play. You're going to have capped upside. You're going to have unlimited downside. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind. MST, I think, is a loaded gun. You have to be really careful with this thing. The reason is because it's using 150% to 200% leverage. So you guys can see these wild swings it has right here, where it can go up really well and it can also go down very well. So you gotta keep that in mind. IMST is a pure play cover call ETF, if I'm not mistaken. I actually have never really dug into IMST, but as I understand it, it is a pure play cover call ETF, similar to like MSTY. And then we have MSII, which is, you know, a half a cover call ETF with a half a leverage, right? So they're doing cover calls on half of the ETF holdings, and then they're doing half, you know, 100 and like, I think it's 105 to 150% leverage on the other half. But again, I just didn't want this product because I just didn't go with it. It's not enough performance data for me to really base an opinion off of. And I wanted to get in now, you know, maybe a little bit of FOMO or something like that. I could interchange MSTY into MSI if I have to. Anyways, I've been talking too much about this. Let's get back into the whole strategy stuff. Okay. So we covered a lot. We understand that strategy, you know, MSTR is going to be basically the growth play. Okay, MSTR is my growth play because I don't want to just rely on a cover call ETF that's just going to go down in value. I need some growth. Okay, I need some growth in this. And this is also why I'm investing into IBIT, so I can get some extra growth. I could just invest into MSTR, which wouldn't be a problem, but I want to invest in both. I want to treat IBIT as a savings account, as a piggy bank. Strategy is going to be my growth play. And then Misty is going to farm strategy volatility and then pay me out an income. All right. I don't plan to use any of the income from here, although things can change. Maybe I'm short on some money and I need to pillage from somewhere. So I'm probably going to pillage from the Misty income. This only pays every other month. So it's not a weekly payer. So I don't have to worry about that again. But yes, this is the strategy. This is the setup. And I plan to keep it this way probably for the next couple of years. Now, why the next couple of years, right? What is prompting investing into Misty all of a sudden and starting a Bitcoin strategy? Okay. Well, aside from the interviews that I've seen and heard and listened to, I also believe in a thesis. Okay. This is why I'm doing a Bitcoin strategy now. And I'm going to go over my thesis. And please, guys, if you have maybe some information, maybe some viewpoints or perspectives, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Okay. I don't have all my stuff together. I could be blind. I could be wrong about a lot of this. I enjoy learning from you guys as well, because I don't have all the answers and I only know what I know. Okay. Based off the available information that I have found. So if you understand something much better than I do, please put it down below in the comments. I look forward to your comments. Anyways, this is the thesis summary that I'm going with. I believe that the U.S. deficit spending continues to soar because of the OBBB. They're going to add $2.5 to $3 trillion to the U.S. economy. All right. This is going to weaken the dollar. Now, that doesn't mean sell out of your portfolio and flock to Bitcoin. No, that's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that there's going to be a flood of money into the U.S. economy. People are going to be buying like crazy. This is going to cause Bitcoin to go crazy. All right. We've seen it since after, the Rona of 19 or Rona 19 came out, right? We saw Bitcoin fly because interest rates come down. And even before that, we were in a low interest rate environment. So this had Bitcoin go crazy. And then recently, as far as the last year or two, Bitcoin went on this wild run because we lowered the interest rate just a few basis points and Bitcoin took off. And then of course you had, President Donald Trump get elected and, he has a very favorable, positive agenda for the Bitcoin space, for crypto in general. So these are all headwinds for Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin does well, MSTR is going to do well. If MSTR does well, then Misty should do well in terms of payouts and, capital appreciation, at least, capped upside. So this is going to lead to the M2 money supply rising. All right. I believe we are in an economic expansion. We are moving into that phase, right? It's not going to start on Monday, but I'm saying like the US economy is moving towards economic expansion. And this is going to, again, flood the economy with a lot of money. And this is going to cause Bitcoin and asset prices, equities to rise in value. Okay. Stocks, that kind of stuff. All right. We also have potential lowering of interest rates, in the second half of 2025, definitely one in 2026 and again in 2027. And this is coming from the Federal Reserve. So if we get lower interest rates, this is going to definitely cause Bitcoin to rise in value. And again, when Bitcoin rises in value, MSTR rises in value. All right. So now let's talk about some tailwinds. All right. MSTR will remain volatile and rise as a leveraged Bitcoin play. I see the additional reporting that they're going to be doing as a tailwind because now they can count Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and this is going to continue. Right, this is a good tailwind for the company. They're not always going to be showing a loss on their sheets or on their earnings. Right, so this will be very, very good. I also am very bullish on the expansion of MSTR as a Bitcoin treasury company. Now think of this. Think of this for a second. You think MSTR is always going to stay in the United States? You don't think that they're going to breach into the European markets or the Asian markets or the other markets out there in the world? You don't think so? Because everyone wants a piece of MSTR. Everyone wants a piece of these bonds that they have, right? Something linked to Bitcoin. Again, you have companies that are investing, like large institutions investing in STRF because the share price is not as volatile as MSTR, and they're going to be able to collect a dividend, right? So, things like Stripe are very, very attractive. They need a stable income for their investors. Now, again, Strike, I think more investors are probably going to start, discovering this. More other larger players are going to start discovering this. They can get a decent 8% dividend yield. Imagine having an 8% dividend yield with an appreciating asset. Most 8%ers out there usually go down in value. All right. That's just a fact. MREITs, BDCs, preferred shares, a lot of them go down in value. Strike has actually been appreciating in value, and it has Bitcoin as collateral. So if Bitcoin goes up, Strike is going to do really, really well, okay, for any Strike holders. Stride, again, is the junk bond. 10% yield maybe if the board approves it. But a lot of this is for investors who don't want the volatility of MSTR. So imagine if they continue coming out with different products, right? They expand their product offering. Could you imagine what's going to happen if, they start going into these other markets where European companies or companies, all over the world start to want to invest in MSTR or something linked to MSTR? I think this is a good tailwind for MicroStrategy. All right. So that's just my thought on all of this. Okay. I'm not saying this is all fact or anything. I'm just saying these are my thoughts. Bitcoin is going to rise in value as money enters the system. All right. Further institutional adoption is definitely going to happen. We're already seeing it. All these new Bitcoin treasury companies coming out every other day. Everyone's adding it to their balance sheet. And then you also have retail investors who are still adding to it. You have IBIT, which is something for me as an investor. I don't want to hold keys and wallets and storage and all this other garbage. I'd rather just buy the ETF. And this is the beauty of that. You have layers of, layers of the finance space or layers of the capital market starting to adopt some way to get a hold of Bitcoin. And retail investors are eating those up. So again, MSTY is a play on MSTR's volatility. And as long as MSTR continues to remain volatile because of Bitcoin, then I see this as a good tailwind for holding MSTY. Again, you can look at those other ETFs and decide what you want to do, but I think MSTY is honestly going to be the better play in my opinion. But of course, there is the risk of NAV erosion and all that other stuff, okay? I also believe that there will be further ETF adoption for MSTR and Bitcoin globally. So imagine, again, other countries starting to open up their floodgates in their capital markets to have access to something related to Bitcoin. And as we already know, if Bitcoin goes up, MSTR is going to go up. So this, again, is part of the tailwind. Now, we do have some headwinds, okay, some risks that I think are prevalent. MSTR has a very low or a very high tax bill over their head, but I think there's a low probability of not getting an exemption, all right, because we have a favorable regulatory environment. They also have a couple lawsuits out. I thought the lawsuits were a big deal, but then I listened to some other YouTubers and some other thought exercises. What company in the Mag 7 hasn't had a lawsuit? Exactly, right? Companies who are, large and in charge and they're gaining momentum, they're getting a lot of investor demand, they're going to have lawsuits. Now, these could be complete nothing burgers and, or maybe the investors care and they don't want to invest in a company that has an active lawsuit. I don't know, but I can't picture a company as large as, even the Mag 7 or even the 10 companies under the Mag 7 not having some type of legal things going on with them. So I think, again, MSTR is one of those companies that obviously they're going to try to, these law firms, they want to make a quick buck. So what's the easy way to get a quick buck? Go after a company like MSTR. So it's just my thoughts is all. There is a possibility of a drawdown. All right. I talked about this in my last video on market predictions. All right. I think there could possibly be a recession. All right. The odds are still elevated at 30 to 45% per JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. All right. Monetary policy tightening can happen. All right. Which means that if we enter a recession or any type of slow growth or something, just something really bad for the economy, this would cause the Federal Reserve to increase the interest rate. But there is a low probability of that happening. I can't see that happening. I could see us going again into economic expansion. It is quite possible we already had a recession. and we just didn't notice it. Now, the last one, and this is the lowest probability of all. If you guys have other ideas for risk, put it down below in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Rejection or restriction of further adoption by Bitcoin globally. You have countries that are adopting Bitcoin. All right, I think is Venezuela is one of them, or I can't remember the other countries, but they're South and Central America, but they're adopting Bitcoin on their country's balance sheet, I suppose. You also have the United States that did the strategic crypto reserve or Bitcoin reserve. You have China that has one. Strategy holds more Bitcoin than all these countries combined, right? It's just ridiculous how much Bitcoin this one company has. So I can't see a restriction, a further restriction on Bitcoin globally happening. So again, nothing but good tailwinds, in my opinion, for why you should invest in something related to Bitcoin or Bitcoin itself. Okay. Again, I inadvertently became a Bitcoin enthusiast now, or a Bitcoin bull. Okay. So I know we're at minute 30, guys. The video is going a little long in the tooth and you're just hearing me yap on. So I hope I'm not boring you guys. I hope you're finding a lot of entertainment in this. Okay. We're about to finish up here. Okay. So let's talk about why MSTY. All right, this is the big one. A lot of people will probably say, why go with MSTY? MSTY's garbage, etc. I was honestly waiting for Roundhill's MSTW product to come out, but they seem like they're dragging their feet on it, and I don't want to wait. And I also could probably benefit from some fund manager diversification because I am really heavy in Roundhill. So this is just going to further add a net benefit to my portfolio. Okay, so here's the drawbacks. We have NAV erosion, which is the most popular. There's capped upside. MSTY is not a growth product, okay? And that's why I have MSTR and IBIT. And honestly, I could probably just get away with MSTR, but then you open yourself up to single man, single company risk. So anyways, there is a possibility, although low, of reverse splits happening in the future, lower payouts, or maybe a fund liquidation event, all right? I can't imagine that because MSTY is Yieldmax's most popular ETF. Now, why am I holding MSTY? I kind of already covered all of this. All right. I need cash flow in order to fund these other investments. I don't plan to spend the money. All right. I can use their payouts as a tactical rebalancing tool. When they pay out these large distributions, if IBIT did really well and MSTR is down in the dumps, well, I could put more money to MSTR, right? Or if vice versa, I can put more money into IBIT. Or maybe MSTY had a huge drawdown because of MSTR. Because of Bitcoin, well, then I can strategically place the money amongst all three, right? So this is why I like this idea, because it's a tactical rebalancing tool. Tax deferral via ROC, return of capital. You're getting paid, quote unquote, your own money back. So this, could be advantageous for those tax conscious people. Now, passive management is a big one. I keep hearing people say, well, you could do the cover calls yourself. Yes, I know I can. Doesn't mean I want to. Doesn't even mean I want to learn how to do cover calls myself. And not only that, in order to buy 100 shares of MSTR, I need like $30,000. And then I could still lose money if I do the cover call wrong. So I don't want to do it. I just don't want to do my own cover calls. I got other things to do, okay? Not saying that is a knock on anyone who does, cover call investing. I'm just saying I just don't want to deal with it. And not only that, thinking a little bigger, personal, finances, I need to show income. I have to show income from investments. Cover call distributions that you do yourself are not counted as income, whereas distributions from high yield cover call investing, those do count towards your income. All right. So if you're going for a loan for a bank or going for a mortgage, you can use that stuff. Or so I've been told. I haven't tried it myself. Take it for a grain of salt. Okay. So now let's talk about, and I kind of already covered this as well, MSTR and IBIT are growth oriented. All right, MSTR, IBIT represent long exposure to Bitcoin, Bitcoin-related equity growth. They are both volatile and don't produce income. That's why you have the MSTY. All right, but they can appreciate massively during a bull cycle. Holding them is a bet on capital appreciation, not cash flow. Okay, so again, keep that in mind. Now, I want to be very, very clear about this. This is not an I'm all in on MSTY play. I personally do not like those videos every time I see them, all right? Or I don't like those Reddit posts or whatever. Personally, I think that's moronic. But hey, if it works out, and I always hear the same thing, well, I got paid back my principal in 1 year. Excellent, good for you. Now, for the new investor, what if MSTR and Bitcoin tank tomorrow and this person just lost all of their money? Again, I think of risk. I think in terms of risk and what can possibly happen. This is why I don't want to do an I'm all in on Misty play. I think that's moronic. All right, beside the point, this is part of a broader strategy to utilize MSTR's volatility as a benefit via an ETF to extract value and recycle it into pure MSTR and Bitcoin spot price ETF. I know I'm going to get some comments. Well, why don't you just start with IBIT and MSTR? Well, simple. I need the income in order to invest in this stuff. I don't work a job, and I have investment income basically taking care of, my day-to-day life. All right. I don't have exactly 1,000 or thousands and thousands of dollars to just dump it into, MSTR or IBIT. Instead, I would rather use the money, dump it into MSTY, and then use the income that it produces to spread it between MSTR and IBIT. All right. So that is just my play on everything. All right. Now, this again, not knocking anyone that does an I'm all in on Misty play. I hope it works out for you. Honestly, I do. Because I don't want anyone to lose money. So here we go. That is pretty much going to be it. I did some back testing using AI, and these were the results. Okay. Because I'm going to also probably get some people who say, well, why don't you put the money into like an S&P 500 index? So I'm going to explain that here in a second. But yes, I used basically some back testing, some charts or whatever, and plugged them all into AI and told them, hey, tell me what the account value would be. If I was to follow this in over the last year, again, we're back testing from April 8th, the first distribution, to June 6th, 2025. I would have an account value at around $102,000. All right. Now, again, take these numbers with a grain of salt because maybe the artificial intelligence got it wrong. I'm hoping not. It does look like it was correct. Okay. Why don't I just do the S&P 500 play? Okay. So again, I'm going to end, if I do the Misty, MSTR, and IBIT play, I would end with an account value of about $102,000. Now, if I was to do the combination of, 50-50 between MSTY and QQQ or all in on QQQ or all in on SPY, the returns are actually abysmal. Okay. The growth is actually abysmal. So again, take this with a grain of salt. I don't know for a fact 100% if these are correct. I used, AI to produce these numbers. They did look kind of correct because QQQ doesn't really appreciate like crazy in 1 year, and neither does SPY, right? Usually you get like maybe a 10% return. So over the year, if you recycled the money, you would have lost money with Misty because you're reinvesting the income, right? 50%, and then reinvesting the rest into QQQ or SPY. And these were the outcomes, right? So this strategy would underperform the Holy Trinity, quote unquote, strategy from earlier. So just something to keep in mind. All right. So we're running on 37 minutes. This is actually a long video, guys. I hope you guys got a lot of value from this, but I had to make this video. I wanted to cover as much as possible. Again, I want to give a very special shout out to Pay Me in Dividends. Again, met the dude, the man, the myth, the legend behind the screen. Solid person, puts out a lot of great content. I really recommend you guys check out his channel. He does a lot of stuff on, strategy / Michael Saylor. And I would really recommend everyone take a look at this, his stuff. But with that being said, that is a strategy. That's what I'm going to be following. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will catch you in the next one. Again, if you have any ideas, perspectives, insights about everything I talked about, please let me know down below in the comment section. I'm always looking to learn from other experienced investors or people more experienced than myself. All right, guys, I will see you later. Have a great day.